Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give it a minute for everyone to join. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're here to talk about winery climate action. So we have time for questions as we go through. And so feel free to put your questions into the Q&A feature, and then we'll get to those after each of our speakers. But my name is Lisa Francioni. I am the Deputy Director of the California Sustainable Winegrowing Alliance. And I'll be starting us off this morning talking a little bit about our Climate Smart grant project that really got us to this point of talking about our Climate Action Toolkit and all of the things that both vineyards and wineries can do to really help address climate change. After that, we'll have Dr. John Heckman talk about building the business case for climate action and really why it's really important overall to be focused on this as one of the many topics that we're all working towards. And we have Jessica LaBounty here from Bogle, who's going to be sharing some information about their packaging and alternative packaging initiatives and also lightweighting. And we're really glad that she's here with us. You may have seen that Jody Bogle was planning to be here, but couldn't make it anymore. So we're really happy that Jessica was able to join us today. And in the very end, I'll share a little bit more about our Climate Action Toolkit. So again, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A and we will get to those as we can. So as far as the Climate Smart grant project, we're actually at the very end of a 2.5-year project where we have really tried to look at what is the latest science around climate change and the impact on vineyards and wineries. So we worked really closely with the California Climate Hub, who did a science literature review on the impacts and also the adaptation strategies. So I'll talk very briefly about that. I know this is focused on the winery side, but everyone's also probably curious about that. Through this project, we worked with a lot of different wine growers from all different size operations all over the state to really try to make sure everything that we were doing as part of this project would really be relevant for, the broad California wine industry. We have created a climate action toolkit, which I'll talk about towards the end, but really focused on what are the specific practices, what are the tools, how do we really do all of this, all of these practices that we need to address climate change. We have workshops and webinars, and we all also briefly mentioned some of the communication materials that we created through this project. This is just to show some of the partners that we've had. So we've worked with the resource conservation districts, with different sustainability programs throughout the state, a lot of different consultants and others who are really key to making this project work and make sure that we had kind of the best practices that we're sharing through this. This is just a snapshot of the climate action working group that I mentioned. So again, people from various operations all over the state, really, again, trying to bring together what's working in different vineyards and wineries throughout the state and how we can best share that throughout the entire industry. So I wanted to really briefly cover some key concepts in climate action just to make sure kind of everyone's on the same page. And really, it starts with what do we mean when we're talking about climate change? And I like to just clarify that we're really talking about the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, and not just kind of day to day, oh, it's cold and it's summer, it's hot and it's winter, but we're really talking about these long-term shifts and that are caused by greenhouse gas emissions, primarily carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide within the wine industry that traps the sun's heat. And then the two other major terms you'll hear in all of the climate action work is mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation is really, mitigation is referring to any practices that actually help to reduce the impacts of climate change. And this can be done by either reducing the emissions from greenhouse gases or actually removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And there's different ways to do that. But primarily in vineyards, we're looking at carbon sequestration, both in the soils and also in any woody plant material. And then adaptation is really about adjusting to both the current impacts that we're seeing today and also the anticipated future effects of climate change. So those two key terms are really important. Mitigating, how do we reduce the overall impact? And then adapting, how do we make sure that we can thrive still in these changing climate? So climate smart wine growing is another term you'll hear. It's really just kind of a catch-all referring to practices that really help vineyards and wineries do both of those things, help to mitigate and also help to adapt. So it's, again, it's kind of a broad term with all of those practices within it called climate smart. This is just a little graphic to show, that there are a lot of practices for all of you who are very familiar with sustainability and certified to the various sustainability programs. You'll see these are very common to you, right? Water efficiency, pest management, biodiversity, canopy management, et cetera, renewable energy. So a lot of the things that everyone within the wine industry who's really focused on sustainability are familiar with are also part of climate mitigation and adaptation. The other thing I like about this graph is to show that in the middle here, you have a lot of things that actually do both at the same time. So focusing on soil health practices can really help you adapt, but also help with mitigation. Same thing with waste management and water. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing that actually address both of these major topics that we're trying to address through climate action. We did a California wine carbon footprint, and actually John was one of the lead people helping us with this back in 2011 to really look at, of the overall footprint of wine, where are the emission hotspots? So where are we emitting the most greenhouse gases? So you can see this study, we've actually compared it recently to a number of other carbon footprint studies done in the wine industry, and it's very aligned with the current results. But you can see that, packaging is a very big piece of a wine's carbon footprint, which is one of the reasons that we're going to be talking about it shortly. And energy efficiency is no surprise that that's another big area to be focused on. So the carbon footprint, looking at the hot spots, which are the results of these footprints, really can help you address where should I prioritize my time and my resources and really focus on making kind of the biggest improvements in this area that will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in your overall operation. Two other terms you hear a lot. One is decarbonization. It really refers to using carbon-free renewable energy for all of your energy needs. So we have this little graphic we created for the Climate Action Toolkit that talks about kind of the process to do that, where you're starting with conducting an energy audit, you're optimizing your energy efficiency using the results of that audit, electrifying any equipment that can be electrified, and then using renewable energy to power that equipment. So that's kind of the way we get to decarbonization, but it really is kind of the ultimate goal that we're trying to reach. And then net zero is another term you'll hear a lot, and it's really talking about the state where the greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere are actually balanced by what is being removed. So you will hear a lot of people talking about net zero goals, and that's really what they're referring to. So the case for climate action, why climate action is needed is really, we all know that we're experiencing direct impacts of climate change right now. So all of the more frequent and intense heat waves that we've been experiencing in especially recent years, the greater year-to-year variability in rainfall, both increasing flooding and extreme weather events and drought are also due to climate change. And there's also been changes in wildfire dynamics. And, scientists expect that these impacts will continue to increase. And so they really affirm that climate change does pose a threat to California agriculture. So it's something that we really need to be paying attention to, really being able to look ahead to and figure out what are the practices that we can implement now and in the near future to be able to adapt to these changes. So cutting emissions is essential. This is a scientific consensus worldwide that to avoid the very worst impacts of climate change, we really need to limit global temperature rise to, the hope is 1.5 degrees Celsius at pre-industrial levels. We did actually reach that number last year, although it fluctuates. So there's crossing our fingers, but currently we're on a trajectory to reach 5.7 degrees Celsius of global warming. So it is something that we all really need to be focused on in any part of our lives, in our businesses, within our governments, et cetera, to really try to get to this scientific consensus goal. Because of that, governments, retailers, a lot of wineries are increasingly setting greenhouse gas reduction targets and also net zero goals. So with, operating within California, who has very stringent goals around greenhouse gas reductions, means that we as businesses within California need to be looking at this as well. And so really, just action by all of us is needed to really help reduce emissions, but also be able to respond to this growing kind of regulatory and market expectations as well. So we have retailers, setting net zero goals, and how do we align with those? So I wanted to really briefly mention some of this literature review work. I know, again, this is more vineyard focused, but just to briefly share with you some of the findings on this. The California Climate Hub is a USDA hub that really is focused on how do they bring the latest science into applied best practices. And so we worked with them to host this workshop, bringing together a multidisciplinary group of scientists, extension specialists, we had viticulturalists, we had people from the wine industry, all come together and really look at what does the science tell us today about climate change, and then how we can also adapt. So a lot of peer-reviewed papers were included in this. You can find this paper within our Climate Action Toolkit, in addition to a summary handout about it as well. I'm not going to talk about this in any depth, but we also did, or I should say, California Climate Hub did a sensitivity analysis that really looks at the impact of climate change to specific wine grape varietals. It's really interesting. And again, we have that within the Climate Action Toolkit if you're interested in seeing that. But it's really no surprise what the expected climate change impacts will be. It's more higher temperatures, it's limited water availability, not just changes in rainfall, but decreased winter snowpack, which also increased droughts, so just less water overall, more frequent and also longer lasting heat waves, which is something we need to pay attention to, of course, extreme weather events with heavy rain events and flooding, increase in extreme wildfire events, and then also with the warming, increased pest and disease pressure. So, things I think most of us are aware of, but it's definitely, shown in all of this literature. And the key strategies to address this. So, managing for limited water resources. So using water conservation, both in the vineyard and the winery, really optimizing irrigation systems, optimizing water use in the winery as well. Managing for improved soil health. So again, there are many things within climate action that have multiple benefits. And I would say the soil health one is one area that really does. We're looking at adding soil amendments, compost, biochar, cover crops, reducing your tillage, all have many benefits, both for plant health, for wine grape quality, but also for climate change, both mitigation and adaptation. Also looking at rootstock selection, vineyard design, there's a lot of things to do to help create vineyards that can better withstand a lot of these climate impacts. And then also reducing fossil fuel use, helping to sequester more carbon. All of these things are really important and are all kind of outlined within this paper. And I just wanted to end before I turn it over to John that we really look at sustainable wine growing as actually being climate action. So even though, looking at those impacts that we see can be daunting, we also know that we've been focused on sustainability for a very long time within our industry. And so it's really positioned us well to be able to address a lot of these challenges that are both here today and that are coming. And so, a lot of the sustainable wine growing practices within the California Code of Sustainable Wine Growing, but also within the other sustainability programs offered in the state, really help to address a lot of these issues and really will help vineyards and wineries adapt to a lot of these challenges. So that's kind of the good news, is that we're already doing a lot of this, and it's really just trying to refocus a little bit on some of these topics, especially the ones that will have the greatest impact, greatest risk to your business, and really focus our attention there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Heckman. Really quickly, I'll mention that John has actually worked with us since 2007. So he is a sustainability consultant, worked with a number of different business sectors over 25 plus years. But we've had the pleasure of working with him within the California wine industry since the creation of the California certification program. And also he, as I mentioned, led the California Wine Carbon Footprint Study. So he's been very involved in this latest Climate Smart grant as well. So I will turn it over to you, John, and thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Hopefully you all can hear me and see the screen there. So I think Lisa did a great job of giving us a bit of exposition coming into this topic. And of course, climate action is something that we all hear a lot about. We all speak in these terms quite a bit. But I guess the question is always, how do we really bring it about? And what is uh, the kind of the process of bringing change within each of the organizations or across the span of control that we all have within our roles. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time of focusing on, how can we bring these actions? How can we actually take steps ourselves in the roles that we have? And I want to focus on this word business case. And if I go to the next slide here, this statement is something that I probably tell people, probably once a day. That all of us here on the call, probably just based upon our own interests and the reason that we're joining in this first place, we are kind of naturally predisposed towards being motivated by the words that Lisa just put in front of us. Here's all of the severity of our the risks that are coming at us because of our increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we're kind of already in the choir, so to speak. We feel like we understand this, but if we're going to take action here, we need to be able to convince others of this, and we are all within organizations that have a number of priorities, right? That's the key point here, is that we need to bring climate action into the context of all the other business priorities that we need to be focusing on. And so that means we need to speak in the same language as all those other business priorities. And so taking everything that we already know, I don't think we're going to be giving you a ton of information that is brand new, but organizing it in a way that can bring others into the same point of understanding. Also, by the way, and making sure that we understand the priorities that others are really championing, and able to compare those and make meaningful action forward. I think that's kind of the key out of a lot of this. And so whenever I think about business value, I like to think about something we call the business value framework. And the very first time that we drew this out, it was Alice and Jordan and I who were when we were first looking at certification in California wine, and this would have been 2007 maybe, and really saying all of the efforts that we're trying to do can get mapped onto a common framework for really how it drives value into an organization. And just think about this framework. 2x2s are kind of the world of consultants, but they are so for a reason. They're nice to kind of bring these ideas into somewhat of a simplistic perspective. And so if we think about value, well, one hand, we want to have value now, and we want to have value in the future. And sometimes we're trying to motivate people to take action on things that will be generating value in the future. So we need to be able to talk about that. Also, we sometimes are creating our own value. Other times we are trying to minimize somebody else taking the value away from us. Those are the things that are costs or risks. And just to kind of blow this out here, revenue, brand, cost, risk, those are the dimensions that we think of when we are trying to talk about business value, when we are thinking about this in the context of any sort of decision making. I think it warrants just kind of digging into the details just for a moment, so that we can do a little bit of a status check for ourselves, thinking through, are we really understanding the steps that we're trying to drive forward in organizations effectively? Are we thinking about, again, not only the value that they're going to create, but how they compare to the other priorities that our organizations have in front of us? And so, again, this is probably not exhaustive, but obviously revenue growth, more money. Oftentimes I'll just say more money, less cost, better brand, lower risk. Or more money now, more money in the future, less cost now, less cost in the future. But that can be both in increases of revenue, but also revenue resilience, so that we are thinking about how we're going to protect our current revenue streams, and the innovation side of things. Where can we bring new products into market that are going to activate the customers who are really looking for those components of our sustainability performance. From a cost side, obviously, operational efficiency is a key piece of that, but also productivity and efficiencies across our value chain, as we see on our next slide, but also as Jessica gets into her story at Bogle, the engagement with suppliers is absolutely fundamental throughout all areas of climate action. And then maybe the areas we spend a bit more time thinking about is around brand and on the risk side of things. And so if we are understanding and kind of digging into these dimensions of value and thinking through our own steps in order to drive climate action forward in this language, I think it helps us bring other people who may not be as focused on or feel as accomplished in the sustainability terms, but using these more general business terms. And so if we go back to that carbon footprint that Lisa put forward earlier on, and just kind of think through for a moment, what are those specific actions that we need to look at? And this is just, again, focusing on the winery, but also the supply chain that is looking downstream from the winery. First and foremost, as I said before, this is an engagement exercise. This is something where we need to be looking at our customers first and all of our suppliers who are bringing that value into our customers. And so if our packaging systems are the single largest component of our carbon footprint, which is the truth, and this is the point that Lisa was making earlier on, is that this study right here is a little bit dated. It's from 2011. However, and also important to keep in mind that our fundamental energy systems, especially on the electricity side, are continuing to improve from a carbon footprint perspective. And so every year we are seeing a reduction in our overall kind of societal-wide carbon footprint because of that progress, which is great. But this data still, from a relative perspective, holds up pretty well. That was a benchmarking study that we had done recently, and as Lisa said, it's available in the Climate Smart Toolkit. But packaging being our most important component to focus on, customers are critical. I think one thing that is good to keep in mind, and I think a little bit humbling, is that companies have relatively few degrees of freedom as far as what their customers are going to allow from them. Customers have a high expectation. So customers expect glass bottles, and so for wine. So if we are going to be bringing alternative packaging systems to them, we need to be thinking about their perspectives, and we need to work with them sometimes to shift those perspectives, but also to look at how we can continue within our traditional packaging systems and still reduce that carbon footprint. So those strategies are critical. That customer perspective is the only way that you can start that discussion. But of course, your suppliers are the ones who can bring the innovation to bear, and lots of great innovation from the wineries themselves, of course. But you have just this incredibly competitive marketplace where people are bringing really interesting solutions into the market every day. And so looking for those engagement, those partnership opportunities is the number one area for us all to be focusing on. As I'm just kind of going through this from a priority perspective, again, continuing with the supplier engagement front, decarbonization of our transportation systems is probably a third of our overall societal carbon footprint. And again, this is where we already are largely depending upon partnerships with suppliers in order to move our goods. And so can we expect this to change overnight? No. And of course, one of the themes here is decarbonization happens through capital investment. And so it happens in a stair-step sort of a way. There are always suppliers who have recently invested in new technology. We all are under pressure from a overall regulatory perspective in California to decarbonize the entire economy by 2045. And so there are suppliers who are trying to take advantage of that and come to market with lower carbon solutions. So stay abreast of that, stay in conversation. Don't necessarily expect miracles from those suppliers, but to reward those who are bringing lower carbon solutions to you right now, and also understanding where their plans are going forward. And the pressure that you provide, again, with a friendly face, but the pressure you provide to let your suppliers know that you care and that you are looking for these innovations and looking for new products that are reducing the footprint of their services is a critical signal into the marketplace. So don't underestimate that. Again, on the electrical consumption side of things, the partnering with utilities is critical, and understanding the lower carbon products that they can provide, as well as reducing your footprint from your own owned solar, for example, owned renewables. Those are really important. From electrification of other activities or decarbonization of other activities, you'll hear me say electrification because that really is the answer for all of this eventually. But you need to really focus on planning. And the reason there is that none of this is easy. It's always infrastructure heavy. You always have a lot of quality and performance topics that you need to bring together so that you're not impacting other parts of the business as you're moving towards lower carbon solutions. And so engaging with the key folks within your organizations to understand what needs to be done and what are the options and how you can build that plan over time is critical. And then lastly, just to kind of round this out, there are other emissions out there such as refrigerant leaks, and those are still very important areas, many times under your own control as opposed to down in your supply chain. And so it's something that you can focus on right now. But again, understanding what those are, all of this is tied into the same kind of parallel discussion around greenhouse gas inventories and understanding how you can build a specific reduction roadmap for your own operation. We will have a webinar here in a couple of weeks, I think June 5th, if I remember right, that is going to be specifically focusing on inventories, and that there are tools within the toolkit that can help you with that. As I think most of you know, there are new requirements within the state to make sure that wineries or any operation over a certain size are doing inventories. I'm not necessarily a fan of inventories for inventory's sake, but they are the best way to really understand how an image like what we're showing right here, which is industry-wide, applies to your own operations. And also where you can kind of show credit or take credit for the progress that you're making to provide reductions over time. So let me just end this here. Again, you've heard me talk about this. Capital is critical, but engagement is kind of the theme underneath all this. No one can do this individually. This is all a team sport, and that is across our supply chain, again, starting with our customers, working in partnership with our suppliers, but then all of our partners in our organizations, everyone, even though they may not have the same title, really are motivated by these priorities, but they've got perspective on other priorities. And it's up to us, if we're the climate responsible people within our companies, to understand their perspectives and be able to bring those together so we can try to provide or find the opportunity to really dig into the opportunities to improve our own companies. I'm just going to emphasize this last point on engagement, and it's one that many people, I mean myself, a lot of us like the details. We like the decimal points. We like the standards. We like the science. We like to dig into the details of sustainability, and that's great. And we shouldn't knock ourselves around for that. But organizational collaboration, as I've been emphasizing, is the key here. And there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of tools that can help us to kind of build approaches on where we're going to go with this. This is just one that I pulled up here around how to build an engagement map for bringing out specific outcomes in our organization. But it comes down to people, and it comes down to the conversations you need to have to identify the right people, to learn about the other things that are going on, and then to build that business case. And the most exciting business cases end up with positive revenue. You're looking at situations that are going to bring success into that organization and be recognized for not just the sustainability performance, but the core near-term business performance as well. So let me just kind of stop right there, and I'm excited to hear Jessica dig into the specifics of the project that Bogle has done recently on the packaging side of things. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, or you segue however you want to.
Thank you so much, John. Does anybody have any questions for John? And Caitlin, sorry, I saw your hand up too late. Would you like to, I can allow you to talk, or you can type in a question. Let's see. Oh, you took it down. Okay, maybe that was an accident. Any questions at all? Or comments even? We can actually unmute you if you'd like to make a comment. And I saw we had a few questions in the chat that I think Thane has been able to answer from the CSWA team. Oh, no worries, Caitlin. Okay, well, we will go ahead and turn it over to Jessica LaBounty. She is the Director of Marketing at Bogle Family Vineyards, Bogle Family Wine Collection, and has been working in the wine industry for over 19 years. She was the Senior Brand Manager at the Wine Group, and before that had various marketing roles at Benzinger Family Winery. So as John was mentioning, very much on the understanding the consumer side of kind of what we're talking about. But Jessica was also the lead on their alternative packaging initiative at Bogle. So it's really great to have you here with us, Jessica, and to share a little about that experience. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, as Lisa said, I would love to share our process and thinking behind our new innovation brand, Elemental. And before we get there, just a brief overview of Bogle. So you may know us from Bogle Family Vineyards, which is our family brand and the core of the portfolio. But we also produce Juggernaut, 20 Acres, Phantom, and as we're here today to discuss, Elemental. And the Bogle family has been in the California Delta for many generations. Their people were farmers for many, many years and then became grape growers and wine producers under their own label. And sustainability has been a huge tenet for many, many years. And we sort of started in the vineyard, which I think is a natural place for many kind of farmer-based organizations to begin. And we've got a lot of recognition over the years from our approaches with our growers, how we incentivize sustainability into our winery. We had a bottle lightweighting project a few years ago that went from kind of standard glass bottles to a step in the right direction, 10 or 15% reduction. And we're in the midst of a second round of that for the bulk of our portfolio right now. We've incorporated solar throughout our winemaking facilities, a lot of the things that John was walking through. But what we hadn't tackled in a major way was alternative packaging, which was really different for us because we're a pretty traditional wine company. So we did a lot of research, but we're really driven by exactly what has been shown. I think I'm the third to put up this slide, but it just kind of shows the power of it and the clear opportunity to investigate how to do something beyond glass. So we started here. There were many trend articles and PR and people outside or periphery to the industry ringing this bell. So we were not, alone in identifying or inventing the problem. And you can see on the right here, we got quite a bit of attention when we finally released our new brand in really February of last year. So I'm going to present next. I'm going to share a video that probably goes without saying for this audience, but part of what I wanted to do today is show how we're communicating with consumers and trying to connect dots to people that are maybe a little more removed from the reality of the glass bottle and the transportation impacts of our industry. So this is just kind of going to be a little taste of how we were trying to frame this for consumers and for trade.
Wine. It's been around for as long as civilization, but how we store wine has barely changed at all. For most of history, wine was stored in clay pots, then in wooden barrels. It wasn't until the 1600s that winemakers began using glass, and by the 1820s they'd settled on the classic wine bottle shape. But nothing's really changed since then. A few brands offer wine in boxes or cans, but almost all wine is still sold in heavy, fragile bottles. And that's sort of a problem, because glass bottles are the single biggest contributor to wine's carbon footprint. That's why we created Elemental Wines. Wine in a real wine bottle that's made from aluminum. Our bottle starts with just a small puck of aluminum. It gets punched into a cylinder, decorated, shaped, and then filled with amazing wines. Voila! When you're done, just toss it in the recycling bin and it's on its way to being reborn. You see, aluminum is infinitely recyclable. When it's recycled to make a new container, it only needs 5% of the energy used to produce the original. The more the cycle is repeated, the more we lower the carbon footprint. But recycling isn't the only positive impact. Elemental travels well, and not just poolside. Our wine bottles are 80% lighter than an average glass bottle. And even though they're a bit shorter, they still hold the same 750 milliliters of wine. Smaller, lighter bottles means smaller, lighter cases. So more cases fit on a truck, which means you need fewer trucks to ship them. Elemental. It's gorgeous, innovative, and it's going to change everything. Elemental wines may not save the world, but they're a sip in the right direction. Wine.
Okay, so now I'm just going to make all the points that were in that video many times over. But you can see the idea was to make it as kind of concise and easy to digest as possible. Here's the portfolio, and you can see the packaging kind of close up. All the wine is certified green, and we just kind of reinforce. A lot of these are consumer facing slides or trade facing slides. The difference between the energy required to recycle glass versus aluminum. From here, we kind of break down all of the different packaging elements that we added to reinforce the key messaging that we wanted to get across. One of the things that we found when we were developing this bottle is it's a little bit shorter than a traditional 750, and we actually maxed out the height. The details in that come into the compression that it takes to bend the aluminum into this neck shape. And so we knew we were going to have a challenge in convincing consumers that this wasn't less wine than they were getting from a traditional 750. So we made a big badge call out here, same volume, smaller footprint. It's also a little bit narrower, so more can fit on the shelf. Excuse me, I'm in a less than ideal location, so hopefully you can bear with me here as we get through this. We've also got our main kind of consumer promises on the back: infinitely recyclable, shatterproof, outdoor friendly, 80% lighter than glass. We've got the green certified seal, and no paper anywhere on the label. So the whole bottle is printed. It's called direct deco, printed right on the bottle. So just all these different ways that we were kind of leaning into our messaging there. And the big thing for Elemental beyond the recyclability of aluminum is the weight and the savings in transport. So we looked at it, from a bottle to a case, and the kind of compounding benefits from a pallet all the way to a truck, and the equivalent weight savings in, kind of recognizable animals. So you can see here, it truly is like economies of scale. The bigger the brand, the more we're shipping, the more people are benefiting. And we can fit so many more pallets per truck, which I think was in that video as well. So we can take about a third of trucks off the road if they were shipping only Elemental. Then we did a life cycle analysis and looked at the benefits for transporting to other countries for export, because as people may know, many parts of Europe are far ahead of us in demanding certain kinds of packaging and promises for their consumer propositions. We do a fair amount of export for Bogle, and we wanted to, kind of get a sense from our European export markets on how interested they would be. Would there be potential for this to be a bigger export brand out of the gate than a domestic brand, just because their consumers and citizens were kind of primed for it already. And the shipping ramifications, or the transport ramifications going at these farther distances, were really, really kind of compelling, especially if they go by air. Most go by ship, but when they do go by air, it just obviously is even more magnified the difference in weight between glass and aluminum. So that was kind of the environmental points that we wanted to get across today. I'm going to kind of morph into more kind of consumer promises here in a second, but as is hopefully was evident, although there was a lot of chaos around me, apologies. The transportation of this is a huge percentage of the impact that Elemental is making. So from a consumer proposition, this is, and I think John laid this out really nicely. We have to bring them along with us. They have to be interested and willing to step out of what they traditionally see as wine, what they expect and what they know to be true, to try something new. And so we talk about the green benefits, as I showed on the back panel, but we also wanted to lean into lifestyle. The fact that you can take this places where glass shouldn't or can't go, how lightweight it is for a consumer living in an urban area. If you're buying your groceries at a small shop and walking up the hills of San Francisco, this is a benefit to you rather than glass bottles. Easily recyclable, and of course, shatterproof is a big promise. So we really have put a lot of effort into making this as glamorous and stylish and modern as we believe it to be, and touching both sides of, like, of course, we want everyone to care as deeply as we do about the environmental impacts, but if we can't force that as rapidly as we want, make it appeal for other reasons consumers are attracted to different products. So sustainability without sacrifice is something that we talked a lot about, that you're not having to choose something that is, awkward or not as attractive looking or potentially not as good. Kind of in the frame of, like, if you're buying like low fat cottage cheese, it's not going to taste as good as like cottage cheese. Like, we don't want people to feel like they're making a trade-off, that they can still have everything they want and are proud of in their wine selection, but also make a really sustainable choice. From there, we know we put quality wine in the bottle, but we were very happy to get out of the gate fantastic scores from wine enthusiasts, which really helps a third-party endorsement tell the trade and the consumers, like, don't worry, if there was a potential psychological barrier to taste, like, if wine's in a glass bottle, is it going to taste tinny? Is it going to taste anything different? There was a lot of consumer education around that. And we kind of went back to, like, does your Diet Coke taste tinny? Does your LaCroix taste tinny? Like, the consumers are used to drinking other beverages. It's just a little bit more of a stretch with wine. So with demos and samplings in a lot of our retailer stores, we were able to kind of get over that hurdle, but the score certainly helped. And then we continued to just kind of develop little messaging elements that were, again, like, very digestible and easy to understand, that would make you want to reach for Elemental. And I'll go through these quickly, but just kind of how we took traditional wine tasting notes with this. So as much as we're pushing the envelope in one direction, we wanted to kind of reassure in other ways that this was, in fact, exactly what you would expect from a high quality wine. Kind of go through the portfolio there. I won't go into depth on it on each individual style. And I think this may be my last or close to last slide, where what we're doing this year, and we're kind of like into year 2. And I should have said, we got tremendous retail support out of the gate. When we were launching this last year, we were really, I don't want to say surprised, but very, very much encouraged that across the board, the major retailers in the US saw the need, had their own corporate initiatives to find products for their shelves, for their consumers, that had environmental promises that were in line with where their organizations were going, and like Target jumps to mind. And we could literally go to these sites, the corporate websites, and pull their commitment to sustainability off of their site and put it in our slide deck and say, this is what you have said that you wanted to do. This is how we slot exactly into that. And I would say we had like 90% acceptance into major retailers across. So now the work is the consumer, and how do we continue to educate and inspire and energize consumers. So we've done a lot of digital work, leading into social media platforms, as well as sampling programs where we can send wine out to influencers, et cetera, and get those third-party endorsements, along with ratings on e-commerce sites. We have found to be very, very helpful. So again, because this is new, having people say, no, I've tasted it, it's amazing. The wine's just as good as you'd want it to be, plus all of these other things, has been really helpful. And here is just the first half of this year, when we combine the followers of all of the people that have touched Elemental and been really excited about it, it's like over 4 million. So that's kind of where we are right now as marketers for this new brand. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's a fascinating story. I love the bottle. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Luca has a question. What about corrosion with aluminum bottles due to free sulfur dioxide?
Well, I'm not a scientist, but there is a liner inside the aluminum that separates it from the wine itself, similar to what you would see like in a LaCroix or a Diet Coke, like no beverage is touching aluminum directly. And it is very important that that liner isn't breached, because if the wine was to touch the aluminum directly, it would not be good.
Mm.
So we did a tremendous amount of testing and are working with a domestic supplier that does aluminum bottles for beverage, does a lot of beer. And we're very familiar with consumable aluminum packages and have done an incredible job. So we haven't had any problem with corrosion.
There's another question about, I'm curious if you know about the difference of the carbon footprint of mining aluminum versus glass manufacturing.
Yeah, I know a little bit. I know enough to say that virgin aluminum is not the best. It's not that much different than glass, but it's on the second use that we really come into play, where glass is so much harder to recycle and the rates of glass recycling are so much lower that from your first use, if it's virgin aluminum to virgin glass, glass has like a little bit of an uptick, but on that second use is where aluminum like leapfrogs over as the much greener choice. So our bottles can go into, I don't know why I'm fixated on Diet Coke, but Diet Coke cans or a million other things, many generations over.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. You're exactly right, Jessica. Both glass and aluminum are very much dependent upon return recycled content, and so, in other words, that is one of the most important ways to reduce the carbon intensity of any use of glass or aluminum is to have a high percentage of recycled content within that package. And also, Jessica's point is right that the transport and integration of glass is more challenging and it's less nationally implemented. And so within the U.S., for example, we have if there's any success story in recycling, it is aluminum. The smelting of aluminum is essentially sticking electrodes into a bunch of clay and shoving it full of electricity in order to dissociate the aluminum from the oxygen. And so it is very intense from a CO2 perspective. But again, for packaging applications within the US, you're looking at a very high recycled content. And it is, again, from my point around supplier engagement and partnering with suppliers, you do want to always encourage that and try to bring that recycled content as high as possible. Glass is something that is still an important part of our industry, and it's something that our customers, many customers are looking for that glass package as well, and so we want to be looking to decarbonize glass packaging as well, and that is both around the increase of recycled content, so programs where we're bringing more cullet into those glass plants, but also looking at alternatives for the glass plant themselves. And there are some really interesting technologies, hybrid furnaces that are using both natural gas and electric elements. And eventually we'll be aiming at electric furnaces, which will substantially help that part of the process.
I knew you would have an answer, John. Another question, someone's asking, would you mind sharing the supplier of the aluminum bottle?
Yeah, I think I can do that at this point. It's CCL Packaging out of Hermitage, Pennsylvania.
Great, thank you. And another question, are you able to track what percentage of the bottles are recycled by the consumer?
We can't at this point.
Yeah.
We can just look at aluminum recycling rates in different geographies and make some assumptions. But no, we as a company, we don't have any way of tracking that.
Yeah.
But there are pretty good data sets, both from EPA. By the way, if EPA can even share data like that anymore, Lord only knows. But also Aluminum Association. There's a lot of data. Again, to our point before, the entire environmental benefit of aluminum is based upon recycled content, so it's actually a pretty well accepted process for how they develop that data and publish that year over year, again on a national basis or for other countries globally. It's to Jessica's point, you really can't look at it from a individual product by product basis.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you.
And I am just going to share a little bit more, like I mentioned, about the Climate Action Toolkit before we wrap up. So this is just a screenshot of the Climate Action Toolkit. And it is a online website that allows you to kind of click through the different pages. And it really includes this step-by-step process. So when we were working with the growers and vintners who are on the working group for this project, we really wanted to make sure that people can really find themselves and where they are in their climate action journey within this process. So we do have a section all around Learn. So if people are very new to these topics, they can go back in and get in a lot more depth of what I covered very briefly at the start of this webinar. But then we also have a section, step 2, around assessing and planning that I'll talk about right now briefly. And then step 3 is all around actually implementing the practices. So even for people who maybe already have a climate action strategy in place, they can still access the toolkit and get details around specific practices and guidance and other tips and tools. So again, we're really trying to make sure that this toolkit can be accessible to all different vineyards and wineries within California, even beyond, but that they can really find a place to start within this toolkit that is helpful for what they're working on at the time. So step 2 is the assess and plan section. We have several ways that kind of help basically get to a climate action plan. So if someone walks through all 3 of those steps, in the end, they will have a written climate action plan for their vineyard and or winery. And so part of that process is actually assessing, what are the current climate smart practices that you are already using and where are the practices that you could also be considering to implement. And so we actually have a tool within the online system where people can do a self-assessment that will allow you to generate a climate smart report and actually help you identify those practices and help you prioritize where you might want to consider for research, researching more, or actually go ahead and just start implementing. We do have information around looking at the adaptation strategies that I mentioned that the California Climate Hub work identified through that literature review of the different strategies specifically for the vineyard side. And then also how to go back and use those carbon footprint hotspots to, again, look at where are the areas that I really want to focus my resources and my time. Like I mentioned, we do have this climate action plan. It's a template that you can fill out as you work through these steps within the toolkit. And we also have a number of climate action goals that are just examples to really give you a sense of, what are some of the different topics that you could be focusing on within your own climate action plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we really consider sustainable wine growing as being climate smart. And so within our code of sustainable wine growing, we've identified, a subset of the practices where they are considered climate smart. And those are the practices that I mentioned you would pull out within that report functionality. If you have never done a self-assessment before, we actually do also have the ability to just do a climate smart assessment. So you can go in there, just assess those 42 vineyard or 43 winery practices, and then run that report to help you with your climate action plan. And then as we already talked about, but of course, using the industry hotspots to really, again, prioritize your practices. John mentioned we're going to be having a greenhouse gas inventory webinar, and you were corrected, it's June 5th at 1 p.m. where we're going to be talking a lot more about how you go about doing that, getting experience from several wineries about how they have done it and the usefulness of it. And so I do encourage you, if you're interested, to join us then. We'll also be talking about California's regulation around greenhouse gas inventories. But again, that's kind of a way that you can help prioritize what are the areas you want to focus on within your climate action plan. And then there's also a number of commercial software options that help you do inventories that, again, can really be useful when you're developing your climate action plan. So this is just an example pulled out from the worksheet. We have both an Excel-based worksheet and a Word version. But it really just lays out, a place for you to put what are the practices that you're interested in exploring, who are the people responsible, what are the resources. There is a lot of cost share opportunities out there to help implement some of these different climate smart practices. So you can basically kind of put it all together within this worksheet. These are just a couple of the different climate action goals that we have in there, that again can give you some ideas of the different practices that you might want to include. But yeah, it's kind of all there ready for you to just take as a starting point and really make it your own. And then the implement section, again, really goes deeper into all of the different topics that are covered and really provides the more kind of hands-on assistance and guidance on the different various practices. So on the winery side, we, of course, go into energy efficiency and renewables. So it's kind of that road to decarbonization I mentioned earlier around energy audits. So resources to do an energy audit within the toolkit, ideas around optimizing your energy efficiency, some information about electrifying equipment, renewable energy, et cetera. We have a page around packaging. So talking about different case studies of different packaging solutions, actually including a case study about Bogle's Elemental is in there as well. So if you're interested in seeing like a written case study about that project initiative, you can see that there. We also have a whole page around reducing the water use in wineries as well, and solid waste. So, reducing, reusing, recycling, being part of that circular supply chain as well. And then within the toolkit, we also talk about sustainable purchasing and suppliers. So a lot of what John was really talking about as far as really partnering with your suppliers is such a key piece of climate action when we're really looking at, the overall footprint and the supply chain. So there's a lot of resources in there on what are the type of questions you can ask your suppliers to really get them engaged in these conversations. We have some fact sheets, some case studies. So a lot of details there, again, within the toolkit. We talk also about vehicles and transportation, so some resources and tools around reducing your fuel use, electrifying vehicles, et cetera. So again, lots more information within the toolkits and these guides that are available there. And this is just to show, so this is the actual link that you can go to today, this beta link, although it will be switching very soon in the next, probably by the end of the week, to our public link. Either link will work no matter, the beta link now, the public link will work probably by the end of this week, but we'll share it. We're going to send out the video recording of this webinar and we'll share these links then. So you can go ahead and take a look at the toolkit. And then I also just wanted to mention that, we did have kind of communications as part of this project. And so we have really looked at how do we talk about climate action as an overall industry. And so we have on the Discover California Wines website, which is a website run by Wine Institute, our partner, has a new section called Climate Action. And that's where you can find some of this kind of messaging around how do we talk about, climate action is sustainability, and some good examples there. We also have some example message points within the toolkit that can help you communicate. And then this over here, over here on the side is just a bookmark that we made. We were involved in an event for SF Climate Week and shared this little bookmark that again kind of points people to that that website that talks about the climate action of the overall industry. But really trying to show people, how to be able to start to message a little bit more around the work that you all are already doing with your climate smart practices. So with that, I'll see if there are any more questions or even comments. And I don't. Yes, we will definitely share the links to the toolkit. Thane, I don't know if you have them handy, can add them right now. But we'll be sure to share email out the webinar recording and then also the links as well. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, John and Jessica. I really appreciate your time today. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Have a great day.